Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of All Things Peer. Today, we're talking about peer supervision. I'm Faye Jackson, the General Manager of Inclusion, and Chris.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Grumley. I'm the specialist peer worker for the organization.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And you're all things peer supervision, really, aren't you?
Part of my role is to implement and oversee the professional peer supervision program across the organization. So, being able to build a framework around peer supervision and just been across that for the last 18 months while that's been trialed and errored and all those sort of things. So,
Right. And you've been training people about peer supervision, haven't you?
yeah, so I completed myself a course on providing peer supervision through the lived experience peak body. And I was able to take some of the knowledge from that across other kinds of expertise as well and put together a program here at Flourish, Australia. And so that's been part of and then also training people that we have within the organization to also provide peer supervision. So that's been my main role.
Okay, great. Chris, what is peer supervision? You hear
Sure.
people sort of go, well, I've already got a manager. What are they? Is Chris going to be my manager now too? Or is the TC I've been told is going to be my supervisor is going to be my manager too? So could you explain the difference between supervision and a manager? What is peer supervision?
Yeah, so peer supervision is very separate to regular line management supervision or any kind of reflective practice that you have with the manager or the team coordinator within the service that you work, as it really focuses on those particular peer work practice aspects of your work. So displaying the core values and principles of peer work, how that might be different to other workers and other colleagues that that are working outside of peer work positions, and really how we can do all of our work through that lived experience and peer work lens.
Mhm.
So when we think about it's a combination really. When we think about peer supervision, things like reflective practice, mentorship, co-reflection, all of those kinds of things really come to mind, and that's because peer supervision is not about someone with a particular expertise passing on what they know or assessing or any of those kinds of things. It's really about two people coming together to exchange what they know. One person, of course, may have more experience and it will be able to touch on things that they know from that experience. But it's really a place where there's no positions of power and they're able to both in a mutually and reciprocal way learn from each other and build up their individual capacities to do their job the best they can.
Mhm. Okay, thanks. So what isn't it? How is it different from a management position?
Sure. So one of the things that comes to mind is that one, it doesn't really focus on those day-to-day aspects of your work. So the KPIs, the individual kinds of visits that you might do. It's more about those values and principles that drive practice. So, you take these things that you learn about peer work and how to apply those different values and principles. And they end up feeding into the work you do every day. But that's not the immediate focus of peer supervision. So it's less about how you're performing in your role, but really to find out about how you affect your work and how your work affects you, and then how you can best discover what you need to really engage and embody those different values and principles in your work.
You've mentioned values and principles a few times today, Chris, and we'll make another video about values and principles in peer work. But could you give a couple of examples about what a value is and what a principle is?
Yeah, sure. So at Flourish Australia, we have our main domains when it comes to our core values in peer work. So we think about choice. We think about how we, approach and perspectives when it comes to our work with that lived experience lens. We also have the way that peer workers embrace accountability, empowerment. So when we think about values and principles of peer work, we think of those really core fundamental things that really drive peer work practice. So it comes down to how we do all of our work through that lived experience lens and all of those things that accompany that. So, it's strength based, it's person led, it's trauma informed. Now, we know that other professions within the organization also work through this capacity, but it's how our lived experience expertise affect how we apply that. So when we think of choice, we might be drawing on experiences in which we may have had where our choice has been taken away, or maybe we don't know how to practice different parts of our choice, like practicing dignity of risk and things like that. So we're able to actually utilize our own personal experiences or the collective experience that we have in the lived experience community to know how that might really affect a person, and then know how we can use that to connect to the people that we work with.
Mm.
So that's a way that we can take a value or a principle, but look at it through that lived experience lens, that peer work lens.
A big part of supervision is about mentoring people about how to use their lived experience purposefully in all aspects of their work, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we're covering and maybe having conversations about those different values and principles, and the way that they utilize their lived experience, I like to always think about it as not necessarily teaching someone or passing on what you know, but it's helping to widen the scope, widen the possibilities, widen the perspective of what someone may know about their work.
Mm.
And, be able to walk just like the work that we do with the people that we support. It's very much walking alongside of them and perhaps, facilitating or acknowledging different aspects of what their reflections, or different aspects of things that they might not have realized that they know, and working with them to be able to see what can come from that.
Mm, mm, mm. And if a peer worker is working with a person that they see regularly and they're having some difficulty in relating, or there's an issue that they're having difficulty in trying to work out how to approach with the person that they're supporting, is that something that they could talk about in a peer supervision session?
Yeah. So as much as we said that we don't talk about those exact day-to-day things,
Mm,
or very particular situations,
mm,
sometimes we know that different situations might be good mediums to have those conversations about how we apply those values, or apply those different practices. So say that a person might be having challenges in being able to connect with someone, or know when to use their lived experience is the thing that often comes up. It might be about, once again, widening that scope. Like, what is using lived experience? Is it just about sharing things that have happened, or what are other places in which we connect? So as an example, some things that might have come up have been, I don't have a similar experience to the people that I'm working with, so therefore I can't use my peer work. And so we may be able to have conversations about where are we actually connecting when we utilize our lived experience, which is usually on the impacts, those feelings. We don't have to have that direct, exact experience as the other person. So that might actually open up some avenues, and for that person to be able to do their work in a more meaningful way.
mm. So it's about, so that people might bring an example
Mhm.
from their day-to-day work, but you extrapolate that out to a broader discussion about the elements of peer work and possible ways of connecting, uh, although you've got the different experiences. It's about through the connection of vulnerability, or the connection of not feeling heard, or the connection of actually being able to get out of your house for the first time,
Yeah.
and I might not have been able to get out of my house because I was hearing voices, and you or somebody else might have not been able to get out of their house because they were feeling really nervous.
Yeah.
So so supervision is about finding the general big picture ways too of working, yeah, rather than the details of the day-to-day management of that particular example, say.
Yeah, because I think when you are concentrating so much on a single event, and you can get really into problem solving. And one of the things that, peer work supervision isn't, it's not an opportunity to problem solve or to use perhaps the facilitator maybe having more experience. It's not up to them to be able to come up with solutions for a person. It's to, just like with the people that we support, it's to, facilitate a space in which someone can, be vulnerable, can be open, can be transparent, and also have an opportunity to, bounce off somebody about, what do they know, what can they do to discover what might be best, and how can they best support a person to be able to help themselves or to support themselves in those settings. A lot of the
Oh,
time in peer supervision, it's not just about what we're saying or how we're saying it, we're also role modeling peer work practice as
right.
we support the person within supervision. So,
That's what I was just going to ask you. So, what you're saying is that how we relate as peers to the people that we're supporting who access the service, we also extrapolate that into the relationship of peer supervision. And there's finding a mutuality and reciprocity, but there's also having that, holding that space so that the person who is having the supervision can find their own way through the difficulties.
absolutely, because we're connecting at a human level, and which is what peer work is. It's about person to person, and we take all of those same values and principles into the supervision relationship. It's a mutual relationship. There's
Mm.
reciprocity. We're coming. I like to call them like lateral relationships. We're on the same level. There might be different roles, just like there is with the people that we're supporting. We might play a different role in the kind of relationship that we have, because that's what allows us to have the purpose in what we're doing with a person. But there's not any positions of power. So by not only promoting that in the sessions, but also demonstrating that in real time, it really reinforces those different values and principles that we bring into those sessions.
So, like I do some mentoring and supervision with you, Chris, don't I? And I find every session that we have that we spend talking with each other um, is is a mutual conversation, and I always learn something from you, and I feel really appreciative of that. And the connection is as deep and as important as connections that I've had in the past with the people that I've supported when I've been working as a peer worker.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it doesn't come from the lens of it being someone that needs your help, or someone that, like, it's about, what can we do in this situation? How can I help you move towards um, who you want to be as a peer worker, or what you want to be able to accomplish, or, to have, we see ourselves through other people, a lot easier than we see within ourselves. So to have someone that we know has had to explore what, what peer work means to them, and how they navigate through those different skill sets and those different values and all those sort of things, we can also reflect on how we've grown as peer workers, like as peer supervisors, and our experience in peer work, how have we grown our understanding, the same way that we would when we're supporting someone as a peer worker in the community, where we're not telling them this is what I do, so try to emanate that. But it's like, how did I discover what worked for me, and how
Mm,
did I reflect on that? It's a similar exercise. So that's why there's so many, peer workers are able to do supervision and provide supervision in such a meaningful way, because there is that kind of double down of demonstrating what they're putting out there at the same time.
mm. Some of the conversations we've had have been much more global in that I talk about the lived experience movement with you and mad pride and that kind of thing. So that's kind of part of the supervision model too, isn't it? It's thinking in big ways about the movement, the peer work movement.
Yeah, it's very appropriate, I think, to what the person, I know that a lot of our conversations and in those settings have been, in my role as a specialist peer worker. So it's about, my focus would not only just be on people accessing services because currently not doing those frontline sort of supports. So it's about really tailoring, what you share and what you're sort of reflecting on to what the person believes that is going to be the best that they want to get out of it. If I was providing supervision to someone who was, out in the community doing work with people accessing the services, I'd be concentrating on my experience, doing frontline work and things like that. Whereas if I was talking to something, I've been able to complete supervision with someone in a peer work practice space, practice lead space, and I'd be reflecting more on my experiences in those kinds of settings. So
Yeah.
you really also tailor what you know
Yeah.
to who you're working with, because they're the places that you're connecting, and that's what brings meaning and purpose into those interactions.
I think it's always good to drop in a little bit of the bigger picture stuff at
Oh,
times
absolutely.
so that
Yeah.
people can aspire to a career, career trajectory. I think
Yeah.
that's really important, and we'll have a discussion, record a discussion about what the future might look like in another episode, Chris.
Just a final note on some of the other things that might be discussed in peer supervision. So there could be also discussions about exploring well-being and meaningful self-care practices and discovering what that could mean for someone, because we know that well-being is a huge part of the accountabilities of peer work. We need to kind of know where we're at to be able to meet people where they're at, and also to be able to, we can explore different challenges someone might be having within where they're feeling stuck, or and we don't go into realms of any kind of therapy or problem solving because that's not our role. But much in the same way, what we do when we support people, we can sit in that discomfort with someone to connect there and then be able to, see where they can progress from
Mm.
there. And of course, conversations about relationships and professional boundaries, and there's many different things that can come up, and it's very directed by what the peer worker wants to speak about and work on.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Well, so who can become a peer supervisor?
Sure. So the conversation about who can become a peer supervisor is very much based on two things. It's about having appropriate experience as a peer worker, especially experience that's relevant to the people that you would provide peer supervision for. So of course, if you've only worked in say like lived experience like advocacy spaces and not in providing frontline supports, it wouldn't be appropriate for you to provide that frontline supervision to someone who is in those frontline peer work positions, because you don't have that experience to sort of connect with.
Mm.
And also it's about not just having that experience, it's about having that training on how to provide meaningful supervision. So how to identify conflicts of interest, about, what are the processes that kind of help streamline providing supervision, because, yes, we don't want it to be so structured and so specific, because we want that flexibility to really have those great conversations. But we can lose purpose and meaning if we don't understand, what needs to be included, what to be aware of, and all those kinds of things. So it's really about having that appropriate training on how to be a peer supervisor and having that appropriate experience as a peer worker.
Mhm. And in Flourish, the peer supervisors are TC, peer specialists.
Yeah, so at Flourish, when we were putting together the peer supervision program, it was decided that the team coordinator peer specialists would be the people trained to become peer supervisors, because the nature of being in that senior peer role meant having that sort of relevant experience in peer work. And then also we were able to put together a training course. We actually did a 3-day training course, which went through advanced applications of all of those different peer work skills and practices and knowledge, about the processes of providing peer supervision, how to identify different, all of those different kinds of tools that someone may need to provide peer supervision. So at Flourish Australia, they are the team coordinator peer specialists who make up the peer supervisor roles.
Right. So, Chris, have you had any feedback about how people are finding supervision when after they've had it? Has it been helpful? Are they finding it difficult? Is it difficult for them to come to? Could you
Sure.
tell me about any pros and cons there?
Yeah, of course, with any kind of new initiative or anything that's introduced, within an organization, and taking into account productivity demands, and trying to work it out with multiple different services in multiple different areas. A lot of people doing shift work or working part-time or casual. Um, there's going to be a variety of challenges, and we're continuously progressing through finding the best ways to work through that, including we went through an extensive evaluation of the professional peer supervision program to really hear any of those ways that we're able to mitigate any of those challenges that we're having, and we've been able to move towards better ways to engage in that. A lot of the other kinds of things were to do with early on, we identified what potential conflicts of interest or potential challenges might be. So an example of mitigating those were peer supervisors were not going to provide peer supervision to peer workers that were working within the same region as them. So there wasn't
And is
any.
that what you mean by conflict of
Yeah,
interest?
yeah,
Could you explain that
sure.
a bit
Yeah.
further,
So
Chris?
I guess in terms of a conflict of interest, we're thinking about different situations or scenarios that might come up that would move us away from um, the process being purposeful for someone. So it could be the person has like a prior relationship with the peer worker, that they're already engaging in line management sorts of supervision or roles, with the peer worker. And of course, any of the individualized kinds of conflicts of interest that might come up. There might be preferences to have people with like certain experiences and things like that. So one way that we tried to mitigate some of those things were those peer supervisors providing supervision to peer workers that were not in the same region in which they worked. So there were, we have a geographical advantage of having services across various states. So we were lucky enough to be able to provide that, and that's been a really good way to mitigate that. But also, anything that's sort of having very open and transparent conversations and feedback avenues has been really good too, for people to identify any of those things early on, and we can be proactive in how to work best with those as they come up.
So, Chris, do you have any, like, has anybody written to you to say whether it's been helpful to them, or left
Yes.
verbal feedback?
Yeah, so part of that evaluation process, we were able to actually um, get a lot of different feedback, in ways that, people found it challenging, but also ways, that people found the process, really great. And like, the intended purpose of the program was really highlighted in a lot of the feedback. I would like to share one of the bits of feedback that I received from a person about the peer supervision that they were part of. So they were able to say that being so new to the lived experience workforce, my supervisor has been a valuable wealth of knowledge to help me build a sustainable perspective on how to effectively engage in peer work. Every meeting is a safe space to talk through ideas and feelings surrounding the support for others, and I genuinely feel listened to. My aspirations towards being a good peer worker right now is one day being able to replicate the atmosphere my supervisor brings to every conversation. So
Right.
I think that's a
Well,
really good sign that, being able to create those safe spaces to have that conversation, and for people to see what aspects of their supervisor they may want to gravitate towards one day, and seeing what they want to kind of work on, and to have a space to do that. So yeah.
yeah, that's great. And what about the rights and responsibilities um, for the peer worker and the peer supervisor, Chris?
When I think about the rights in which both parties have, of course, to be able to have a safe space, and we have made up different kinds of processes to be able to ensure that, like training on how to create those spaces, the way we store documentation, and the way that that's sort of really getting a solid understanding of what duty of care and dignity of risk is when it comes to supervision, but also the responsibilities of being able to be available to showing up, because that shows respect to the other person's time. And of course, everyone's very, very busy. So, those like sticking to those times are really important as well. And being able to have that open and transparent communication if something does come up. But it's also,
Important to remember too, isn't it, that often while these things take time, they often save time down the track, don't they? Because they can often these conversations can often prevent problems from occurring, can't they?
Absolutely. One of the responsibilities is also to ensure that a supervisor is, supporting the conversation, staying within the realms in which supervision has been, you know, of what the purpose is for the supervision. So perhaps if a peer worker may start, venting grievances about their manager or something like that, as much as we don't want to devalidate what someone's feeling, compassionately challenge that and then be able to say, hey, look, how can I support you maybe to be able to face this challenge? What resources can you pull from to be able to move closer to where you want to be with this challenge? As peer supervisors, we're not advocates for the person. We can't sort of be like, oh, I'll talk to them for you. Or, we're not someone who can go outside of that space to keep the supervisor and peer worker relationship really, really purposeful. It's important to stay within those realms, unless it does become any kind of concern about immediate risk of harm and things like, just like with everything.
Mm,
But yeah, that's part of like really making sure that we know what our accountabilities are within
mm,
our roles and making sure that both parties know that.
mm, mm. I know I was giving supervision to someone outside of Flourish who was in a very senior position, and they were managing peer workers. And one of the peer workers did something that was illegal and was not okay. And that may happen sometimes because peers are human, but it's very rare. But I remember that the person that I was supervising had no idea what to do because the peer was a peer. And I said, yes, but the peers need to be responsible. And also the focus needs to be on the person that the peer was supporting. So people need to be held accountable, don't they?
Absolutely.
And
So I
my
think,
recommendation, of course, was that the police need to be involved because that was a very serious issue. But generally, the supervision that I give to people are more about, as I mentioned before, about the big picture things and about taking care of themselves and where their boundaries are and the future.
part of those values and principles we push forward is about like agency and self-agency and accountability. Part of like professionalizing, peer work and its practice and the workforce is making sure people are accountable to all those different things too. That it's not just about, of course, the rights of people are super important, but also their responsibilities, because we are taking on big roles of responsibility when it comes to supporting people going through their own challenging times. So, if we're not held accountable as well, how can we practice speaking to other people about keeping accountable? As peer workers, we're role models, whether we like it or not. People are watching, people are listening, and we
Mm,
need to be able to, be mindful of like, hey, what do we want to represent here?
mm,
We want to, what are we meaning? What is our purpose?
mm.
Because we are connecting to people at that human level.
And I think that's the difference, and probably for another discussion about between peer work and other work. So I have a peer supervisor, and I I would not have gotten anywhere near as far as I have in my career without them. I hope that I've been able to help you, Chris, and I'm sure that you're helping many people. So is there a message that you'd like to end this um, episode about peer supervision with?
Yeah, I think really acknowledging that, as what you said before, with any kind of initiative like this, that takes time away from the other work that we're doing and things like that. It is very, very hard to kind of like manage those feelings of immediacy, and but it's really, there are so many wonderful things that can come from people engaging in something like this when it comes to better outcomes for the people that we're supporting, for retention, for pride in practice, because that also connects back to the pride for people with lived experience and bringing it up through organizations. And it just really shifts culture all over and just makes better outcomes overall. So I think it's something to really keep an eye on. I hope it continues to grow across the board. And I'm really proud that at Flourish Australia, we're able to really focus and hone on the importance of it, and put the time and resources to be able to do it. So, yeah.
Well, I'm really proud of what you've done so far, Chris, and I'm really value and have great pride in the people who have their supervision and the supervisors who are giving it. And I really urge everybody to make sure that you get to your supervision sessions. Don't skip them, because you won't feel good if you skip them, and it's going to be really helpful to you. So take care, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Faye.